Long before the practice of witchcraft was frowned upon, there were those who knew the language of leaves. They walked the margins of forest and village, gathering remedies from root and flower, whispering to plants not just as medicine, but as kin. This is the story of herbalism before it was demonized. Before the burnings, before the trials, before the silence. From the temple gardens of Egypt to the mountain paths of Peru, from the grimoire to the grandmother's cure, we'll follow the thread of botanical magic through centuries of reverence, repression, and rebirth. Not just to learn what was done, but to remember what was lost, and what still waits, just beneath the soil. Long before witchcraft was a word weaponized by inquisitors or reclaimed by practitioners of modern magic, the herbalist path wove its way quietly and reverently through the earliest forms of human society. In the oldest mythologies and medical systems, there is no separation between medicine and magic. The priest is a physician, the herb a sacred emissary, and the act of healing a cosmic rite. In ancient Sumer, the earliest written language was used not only to catalog trade and empire, but to document medicinal plants. Clay tablets from Nippur, 2100 BCE, reference over 250 plant-based remedies, including poppy, henbane, and myrrh, many still in use today. These formulas often combine herbs with incantations, revealing a seamless blend of empirical observation and spiritual implication. Egyptian medicine, too, was inseparably ritualistic. The Ebers Papyrus, dated to around 1550 BCE, contains over 700 prescriptions, many of which instruct the healer to speak specific words while applying the herbs. For instance, a remedy for asthma required not only inhaling the vapors of heated herbs, but chanting praises to the gods as the breath was drawn, a vivid reminder that every plant was a bridge between the divine and the physical. Frankincense and blue lotus were not merely medicinal. They were sacred fragrances used to open consciousness in temple rites. In India, the Atharva Veda, one of the oldest Vedic texts, speaks of divine herbs as not only healers, but as spirits to be placated and communed with. Ayurvedic herbalism, which survives into the present as a sophisticated medical system, emerged from these scriptural roots with an emphasis on balancing the doshas, or bodily humors, through plants and rituals. Herbs like tulsi, or holy basil, ashwagandha, and neem were regarded as sacred gifts from nature, with spiritual qualities that harmonized with cosmic principles. The ancient Greeks inherited and elaborated upon this legacy. The philosopher-botanist Theophrastus wrote Historia Plantarum, 300 BCE, an early attempt to classify and understand plant life. Later, Dioscorides, in his monumental De Materia Medica, compiled over 600 plants with detailed notes on their medical and magical applications, a text so influential that it remained in use well into the Renaissance. But perhaps the most profound philosophical development came from the Hermetic tradition, the principle of as above, so below. This idea, central to both Hermeticism and later alchemical thought, held that every herb was a mirror of some cosmic force, that rosemary was not merely a culinary herb, but a manifestation of solar energy and intellectual fire. Indeed, even the act of gathering herbs was governed by ritual and planetary correspondences. Harvesting under the correct moon phase, day of the week, or astrological hour, was believed to align the plant's virtue with its intended magical or medical function. This was not superstition, but a system, one deeply rooted in observation, symbol, and relationship. Meanwhile, in the New World, indigenous peoples practiced their own form of plant magic, rich, regional, and deeply relational. The shamans and medicine men and women of the Americas did not simply use herbs, they engaged them in dialogue. Tobacco, sage, and peyote were not resources but relatives, teachers with whom one entered into sacred covenant. These traditions, often orally transmitted, were rooted in place, lineage, and vision, and continue today despite centuries of attempted erasure. In all these early systems, one sees a through line. Plants are not just materials but intelligences. They act as intermediaries, thresholds between body and spirit, cosmos and self. The herbalist was not simply a technician but a mystic, one who perceived in leaves and roots the fingerprints of the gods. By the time the Christian West began to divide magic from medicine and spiritual practice from empirical knowledge, the herbalist's ancient role had already been established across thousands of years and hundreds of cultures. Whether tending temple gardens, gathering nightshade under the new moon, or whispering to plants for insight, the early herbalist was not an outlier, but a core figure in the cosmologies of health, spirit, and the sacred earth. As Europe emerged from the classical era and moved into the medieval period, herbal knowledge did not vanish. It changed hands. The torch was passed from temple priests and philosophers to monks, midwives, folk healers, and cunning folk. And in this transitional moment, herbalism became not only a tool of healing, but an expression of resilience, social marginality, and spiritual continuity. Within the monastic system, the preservation of ancient plant lore was a deliberate act of devotion. Monks in Benedictine and later Cistercian monasteries carefully transcribed the writings of Dioscorides and Galen, cultivated medicinal gardens, and infused their practice with Christian prayer. The Physica of Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century German abbess and mystic, blends observational herbal medicine with spiritual cosmology, describing plants not only by their humoral qualities, but by their moral and divine signatures. For Hildegard, herbs carried viriditas, a greening force that was both biological and spiritual, and through which divine vitality flowed. But beyond the cloisters and cathedral gardens, a different kind of herbalism was unfolding, one that was less scriptural and more oral, less clerical and more intuitive. In villages, forests, and along hedgerows, the cunning folk, local healers, charmers, wise women, and herbalists were tending the sick, assisting births, crafting amulets, and whispering incantations to plants under the waxing moon.
The word cunning derives from the Old English kunnen, to know. And these people knew what root eased childbirth, what leaf countered fever, what herb banished nightmares or hexes. These were repositories of intergenerational plant wisdom, inherited not from books, but from grandmothers and village midwives, from dreams, omens, and careful listening to the earth. Their practice was wildly syncretic. A healer might recite a Christian prayer over a brew of yarrow and mugwort, mark the sign of the cross while tying herbs in a red thread, and simultaneously invoke ancient pre-Christian deities or spirits of place. In Ireland, the Banfiesa, or wise woman, might offer herbs to the land spirits as part of healing. In Italy, the Strega carried plant lore alongside folk Catholicism and lunar rites.
And in the British Isles, the practice of wort cunning, the magical and medicinal use of plants, thrived as a hidden current beneath the surface of the church. Magical timing was essential. Practitioners often harvested herbs at dawn, under particular planetary hours, or on sacred feast days such as Midsummer or All Hallows. Plants were sometimes gathered with iron knives or with no metal at all, in silence, barefoot, with an offering. The belief was not only that plants had properties, but that they had spirits, personalities, moods. To harvest was to enter a relationship, and missteps could result in magical backlash or spiritual imbalance. Grimoires from this period, such as the Picatrix or the Book of Honorius, show that elite magical traditions echoed many of these folk practices. They too emphasized planetary correspondences, ritual purity, and astrological timing in herbal workings. The Key of Solomon instructs magicians to gather herbs on certain days and hours, under the rule of specific angels, and always with consecrated tools. At the same time, early pharmacopoeias such as John Gerard's Herbal 1597 and Nicholas Culpeper's Complete Herbal 1653 fused empirical botanical descriptions with magical and astrological frameworks. Culpeper famously railed against the exclusivity of Latin medical texts, offering herbal knowledge in English to the common people, and rooted his diagnoses in a blend of astrology and alchemy, treating rosemary as a solar herb, or nettle as a Mars plant, prescribing them based on planetary imbalances in the patient's constitution. But the cunning folk walked a precarious line. While often respected in their communities, their powers also drew suspicion. The very attributes that made them effective, herbal mastery, spiritual insight, ambiguous religious affiliation, made them vulnerable.
The line between healer and witch was not drawn by their practice, but by the perception of power. Accusations of witchcraft often followed a failed cure, a jealous neighbor, or the visible independence of a woman. And with the rise of inquisitorial authority and Reformation tensions, the church and secular courts began to see herbalism outside official channels not as benign folk craft, but as devil's work.
Still, despite persecution and suppression, cunning herbalism endured. In some regions, it went underground. In others, it adapted, merged with Christian prayer, or recast itself as quaint superstition to avoid scrutiny. The knowledge survived in kitchen gardens, in whispered spells, in recipes passed from mother to daughter. This chapter in herbal history reveals not only the persistence of plant magic, but the ingenuity of its stewards. The cunning folk were not rebels by design. They were simply those who kept the old ways alive when the world around them changed. Their craft was not revolutionary in theory, but in practice it preserved an older vision of healing, one in which plants, planets, and people were all part of a living, enchanted world.
To trace the history of herbal magic in the Western world is to walk through a garden that was once set aflame. Between the mid-15th and 18th centuries, a shadow descended upon Europe, a period in which herbal knowledge, feminine autonomy, and ancient spiritual practices were systemically branded as heresy. It was not simply an era of fear, but of deliberate unmaking. The slow, methodical dismantling of a worldview in which nature was alive, relational, and sacred.
The witch hunts were not born in a vacuum. They emerged from converging crises, religious, political, and epistemological. The Protestant Reformation had shattered the authority of the medieval church. And in the wake of that fracture, both Catholic and Protestant institutions scrambled to consolidate spiritual power. The Inquisition's gaze, once focused on doctrinal dissenters, turned inward toward the domestic and the rural. New forms of governance sought to regulate what had once been local and communal. The body of knowledge once transmitted through women, healers, and midwives, especially that which involved the manipulation of nature, became suspect. Between 1450 and 1750, estimates suggest that between 35,000 and 60,000 people, mostly women, were executed for witchcraft across Europe and its colonies. These women were not the grotesque figures of propaganda, crones whispering to the devil by candlelight, but largely the herbalists, healers, and cunning women who held power through knowledge, the power to ease pain, to induce sleep, to bring forth or prevent birth, to treat plague and fever when doctors could not. As historian Lyndall Roper notes in Witch Craze, the trials were as much about gender as about heresy, an attempt to reassert patriarchal and institutional dominance at a moment when the church was losing grip over the sacred. Herbalists and midwives, who mediated between life and death, health and illness, were reinterpreted as agents of the demonic feminine. Their traditional symbols, the broom for fertility rites, the cauldron for herbal decoctions, the cat for vermin control, became twisted into marks of diabolical allegiance. The invention of the printing press helped codify this fear. Manuals like the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, published in 1487 by Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Springer, spread across Europe like wildfire. The book was as much a theological argument as a psychological assault. It asserted that women were weaker in faith, more carnal, more susceptible to the devil, and therefore natural vessels for witchcraft. Within its pages, the herbs and salves of the healer were reinterpreted as poisons, the chants and prayers of the midwife as spells. But within these accusations lay buried a paradox, the very acts for which witches were condemned, mixing herbs, anointing with oils, entering altered states, were rooted in medical and mystical traditions dating back thousands of years. Consider the infamous flying ointments. Demonologists claimed witches used these salves to fly to Sabbaths, where they would engage in infernal orgies. Yet when scholars examine the recipes preserved in trial records and manuscripts, the contents are strikingly pharmacological. Mandrake, henbane, belladonna, and datura, all members of the nightshade family, contain alkaloids that induce vivid hallucinations and sensations of flight. Applied to the skin with animal fat, a natural transdermal base, these ointments could easily have caused experiences of astral travel, shapeshifting, and dissociation from the body. Modern ethnobotanists, such as Richard Evans Schultes and Christian Ratch, have suggested that these practices were not mere fantasies of demonic flight, but echoes of pre-Christian shamanic traditions, rituals of ecstatic transformation mediated by plant allies. What the Inquisitors saw as evidence of satanic pact was, in truth, a vestige of the ancient ecstatic mysteries, in which plant consciousness opened portals of perception and communion.
The persecution of these practices must therefore be understood not as the eradication of evil, but as the consolidation of control. It coincided precisely with the rise of professionalized, male-dominated medicine. As Barbara Einreich and Deidre English observe in Witches, Midwives, and Nurses, The witch trials were a war on women healers, a way to replace local, female-based knowledge with licensed, clerical, and later state-sanctioned authority.
Herbal medicine, once communal and sacred, was relegated to superstition. Male physicians, educated in Latin and protected by institutions, claimed the mantle of rational science. This transformation was philosophical as much as social. The worldview of the witch was holistic, mind, body, and spirit, interwoven within a living cosmos. The worldview of the emerging modern order was mechanistic. Nature became an object of study rather than a subject of reverence. The earth was no longer a body filled with life, but a clockwork system awaiting human mastery. The herbalist's cosmology, as above so below, was displaced by the Cartesian divide between spirit and matter. What could not be measured or quantified was rendered irrelevant or dangerous. Yet knowledge, like seeds, does not vanish when buried. It waits. Even in the midst of persecution, herbal wisdom persisted underground. Folk healers continued their work under the guise of piety, replacing pagan invocations with Christian prayers, renaming their spirits as saints, baptizing their plants in holy water. In Scotland and Wales, herbalists survived under the names charmers and blessers. In France, le bonne femmes treated illness with herbs and whispers. In the Caribbean, enslaved Africans preserved their plant knowledge under the cover of Catholic syncretism, birthing traditions like Obeah and Vodou herbalism. Across the globe, the spirit of the herbal witch found new languages through which to speak. The witch hunts were not only an external persecution, they marked an internal exile. Generations of women learned to silence their instincts, to mistrust their intuition, to fear their own hands. The knowledge that had once passed through song and ritual now moved in silence, hidden in kitchens, in gardens, in lullabies.
This collective wound, the witch wound, is more than historical trauma. It is a psychic inheritance. It represents the rupture between humanity and the living world, between the rational and the magical, between the masculine will to control and the feminine will to commune. To heal is to remember, to remember, to put back together what was torn apart.
The herbs still grow, the soil still remembers, and beneath the ashes of burned gardens, seeds remain dormant, waiting, as they always have, for the return of the tending hand. To gather herbs is an act of touch, to prepare them an act of technique, but to work with them magically, to infuse them with intentional power, to awaken their subtler forces, is an act of worldview. Every form of herbal magic rests upon a philosophical foundation, a theory, implicit or explicit, of how nature, spirit, and consciousness interact. And while the rituals may differ from village to temple, grimoire to kitchen, the frameworks behind them echo with astonishing similarity across time and place.
At the heart of many magical herbal traditions lies a central truth. Plants participate in meaning. They are not inert substances, but active mediators of divine order, personal transformation, and cosmic harmony. To engage with a plant magically is not simply to use it for a result. It is to enter a relationship, one encoded with symbols, correspondences, and intelligence.
One of the most persistent frameworks in Western herbalism is the doctrine of signatures, a theory that nature marks each plant with visible signs of its purpose. A plant with heart-shaped leaves might heal the heart. A yellow flower might aid the liver, corresponding to the yellow bile of Galenic humoral theory. A root shaped like a hand might assist with grasp or grip.
This idea, formalized in the Renaissance by figures like Paracelsus, asserts that the divine speaks through form. The macrocosm inscribes itself into the microcosm. In this way, the world becomes a readable text, a book of nature, whose grammar is shape, color, texture, and scent. To learn herbal magic, then, is not merely to memorize lists, but to read this living scripture.
Critics dismiss the doctrine as naive symbolism, but in truth it encodes a powerful spiritual epistemology, that nothing in nature is arbitrary, and that observation must include intuition, imagination, and resonance. Another foundational framework is sympathetic magic, articulated most famously by anthropologist James Frazer in The Golden Bough. The principle is simple. Like affects like. Plants associated with the sun by color, shape, growth habit can bring vitality or success. Those under Saturn might aid in banishment or deep introspection. This logic underlies planetary correspondences, where herbs are assigned to celestial bodies, rosemary and sunflowers to the sun, rue and nettle to Mars, vervain to Venus, mugwort to the moon. These associations are not merely poetic. They form part of an esoteric system wherein the herb acts as a conduit for cosmic forces. A lunar herb harvested during the waxing moon in a ritual of divination becomes more than itself. It becomes a harmonizer between human intent and lunar rhythm. When an herbalist constructs a spell or charm, they are aligning these forces, the plant's physical properties, its symbolic resonances, and the timing of its collection or application. This is not random. It is deeply architectural, a choreography of will, nature, and cosmos. Beyond correspondence lies another layer, the animist worldview found in indigenous folk and non-Western systems. Here, the plant is not simply a tool or symbol. It is a being. It has personality, voice, memory. To work with it requires respect, negotiation, offering. In Amazonian shamanism, a plant is not ingested merely for its biochemical effect. It is dieted, communed with, often in silence and seclusion, to learn its song. In African diaspora traditions, plants may be aligned with orishas or spirits, and called upon not just for their medicinal properties, but for their mythic relationships. In Northern European folklore, it is common to ask permission before harvesting a plant, a practice echoed in Wiccan rites and animist revivals today.
This animist framework places the practitioner in a position of dialogue, not dominance. The practitioner is not a manipulator of ingredients, but a participant in a sacred ecology. Power does not come from command, but from connection.
In Hermetic and alchemical traditions, herbs are understood as carriers of threefold essences: sulfur soul, mercury spirit, and salt body. A plant may be extracted not only into a tea or tincture, but separated into its alchemical principles, purified and recombined, a process known as spagyrics. This elevates the plant from a raw material to a perfected, spiritualized medicine. The alchemist sees herbs not as commodities, but as evolving entities. Their potency is not fixed. It can be exalted. And through that exaltation, the practitioner too is transformed. For alchemy is not merely the transmutation of matter, but of self. In modern occult psychology, especially in Jungian and post-Jungian traditions, herbs are seen not only as agents of change, but as carriers of archetypal resonance. Wormwood may not only aid digestion, it might awaken bitterness and truth-seeking in the psyche. Rose, long associated with Venus, may act as a balm for grief, an opener of the heart's defenses, a pathway to Eros. This psychological model overlaps with modern somatic practices and intuitive herbalism. Here, the plant's effect is observed not just in physical terms, but emotional, psychic, even dream-based responses. What comes up when I drink this tea? What memories? What images? What feelings arise? Practitioners using this framework may keep plant journals, dream logs, emotional maps, tracking the plant's conversation with their inner world. Each of these frameworks offers a lens, and none are exclusive. A modern herbalist may draw upon all five, harvesting vervain under a waxing moon sympathetic, offering a prayer before the cut animist, preparing it as a spagyric tincture alchemical, observing their emotional responses psychological, and noting its leaf shape for insight signature. Together they point toward a truth at the heart of all magical herbalism. That magic is not in the plant alone, but in the relationship. That intention without listening is noise, and technique without reverence is sterile. That to practice herbal magic is to live in a world where meaning is layered, consciousness is shared, and every leaf is an invitation. While much of modern Western herbal magic traces its lineage through Europe, through cunning folk, alchemists, and Wiccan revivals, the roots of plant-based spirituality run far deeper and far broader. To limit the story of herbalism to the Western world is to obscure a global garden of traditions, ancient, living, and often still thriving despite colonial erasure, forced conversion, and cultural fragmentation.
Across the world, plants have always been more than nutrition or medicine. They have been presence. Spirits, ancestors, emissaries of divine intelligence. And the herbalist has never been just a technician of symptoms, but a translator between realms, a ritualist, a steward of relationship.
In India, the science of life, Ayurveda, emerged over 2 millennia ago as a vast and holistic medical system. Unlike reductionist Western models, Ayurveda understands plants through energetic principles. Rasa, taste; virya, potency; vipaka, post-digestive effect; and prabhava, specific action, all of which interact with the 3 doshas: Vata, air, ether; Pitta, fire; and Kapha, earth, water. But beyond physical medicine, Ayurveda carries deeply esoteric threads. The herbs are said to contain prana, life force, and their energetics are tied to planetary deities, mantras, and rituals. Tulsi holy basil, for example, is not merely a respiratory herb. It is the incarnate form of the goddess Lakshmi. Its care is a religious act. Its offering is devotional. Vedic texts also classify herbs under nakshatras, lunar mansions, prescribing specific timings and rituals for gathering them. Many Ayurvedic practitioners still chant the Dhanvantari mantra, invoking the divine physician before preparing medicines. A subtle act of consecration that binds spirit practitioner and plant into shared purpose. In China, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, offers another complex and holistic paradigm. Here, herbs are classified not by active ingredients, but by their effects on qi vital energy, their relationship to the five elements, wood, fire, earth, metal, water, and their directional movement ascending, descending, inward, outward. Ginseng strengthens the white qi defensive energy, mugwort, i.e. warms the womb and drives out cold. Reishi mushroom. Lingzi is a symbol of spiritual immortality and is revered in Taoist alchemy for opening the heart and spirit. Herbal formulas in TCM are rarely single ingredient. They are orchestras with a chief herb deputies and assistants forming dynamic relational medicines.
Taoist practitioners often use herbs in conjunction with breathwork, qigong, meditation, and ritual fasting. In alchemical texts, plants are said to nourish not just the organs, but the shen, or spirit, transforming dense energies into subtle light, part of the Taoist goal of achieving longevity or even transcendence.
Among indigenous peoples of the Americas, plant magic is rooted in kinship. Herbs are not resources. They are relatives, each with personality, voice, and history. In Lakota tradition, for instance, sweetgrass is braided like a child's hair, smoked or burned as an offering, and said to carry prayers to the spirit world. Sage is used not only for purification, but for guidance and protection. Its smoke a medium of spiritual clarity. In Amazonian shamanism, plants are dieted, consumed in isolation over many days, during fasting and silence, to learn their icaros, or songs. These songs are not about the plant. They are the plant's voice revealed to the practitioner through dream and vision. Ayahuasca, chacruna, and other teacher plants are considered conscious beings, gatekeepers of other worlds. For the Huixcal people of Mexico, the peyote cactus is not a hallucinogen, it is Hikuri, the deer spirit, a sacred initiator into divine reality. Every part of the pilgrimage to gather it is ritualized, and misuse of the cactus is seen not as pharmacological abuse, but as spiritual violation.
These traditions are not relics of the past. They continue today, often under threat from land theft, biopiracy, and cultural commodification. To work with these plants as outsiders demands humility, respect, and the willingness to confront colonial histories.
In African traditional religions, ATRs and their diasporic descendants, hoodoo, obia, vodou, candomblé, herbs function as sacred technologies. Plants are associated with Orish's divine archetypes, used to construct spiritual baths, charms, and workings that affect not only the body but destiny. In Yoruba cosmology, leaves, yu, are vessels of Ase, divine power. The preparation of herbal mixtures is often accompanied by incantation, rhythm, or song, the knowledge of which herbs cool or heat the spiritual body, which cleanse the aura, which attract wealth or break hexes, is passed through lineage and ritual, not textbooks. Hoodoo, the African-American folk magic tradition born in the crucible of slavery, blends West African root work with European grimoires and Native American plant knowledge. Herbs like High John the Conqueror root, Devil's Shoestring, and Angelica root are used for protection, power, and spiritual justice. These were not just spells, they were acts of resistance, survival, and self-determination. In Polynesian traditions, plants are embedded in chants, cosmologies, and genealogies. The Kahuna Lau Laba'o, or herbal healers, of Hawaii worked with manifold plants not only to treat illness, but to realign spiritual imbalance. Noni, Kava, Kukui, and Taro were more than sustenance, they were embodied memory, considered descended from gods or family lineages. Herbs are often gathered with invocations to the Omakwa, or ancestral spirits, and preparation may involve pool, prayer, hula, ritual dance, and Ho'oponopono, spiritual reconciliation. The landscape itself is seen as sentient. Herbal healing is inseparable from land healing. Together, these global traditions do not form a monolith. Their rituals, cosmologies, and ethical frameworks are distinct, but what they share is profound. A reverence for plants as subjects, not objects, a cosmology in which nature is infused with spirit, a lineage-based transmission of knowledge, a sense that herbal practice is sacred responsibility, not exploitation. And in a world that increasingly extracts, commodifies, and forgets, these traditions serve as vital countercurrents, reminding us that healing is not a product, but a relationship, not a transaction, but a return. To work with herbs globally is not merely to learn new plants, but to decenter our paradigms, to recognize that plant magic is not a Western invention, but a global inheritance, far older and more complex than any single system. The modern practitioner is invited not to appropriate, but to listen, not to collect, but to relate, not to dominate, but to tend.
Across time, across continents, and across spiritual paradigms, one truth has remained constant. The plants are always speaking. In clay tablets and temple walls, in forest paths and monastery gardens, in whisper prayers and outlawed grimoires, the wisdom of herbalism has endured not because it was written, but because it was remembered. Carried in hands, mouths, and dreams. Surviving war, colonization, suppression, and even fire, the sacred dialogue between humans and the green world has never truly been severed. It has only gone underground, waiting for us to listen again. What began as a practice of survival, treating illness, easing birth, protecting the hearth, has always also been a metaphysical act, an alignment with nature's intelligence, a re-entry into a cosmos where spirits and matter breathe together. Whether through the chants of Vedic healers, the shadowed ecstasies of witches, or the rituals of root workers and shamans, herbal magic has always asked a deeper question. What is the nature of relationship? You don't need a lineage to begin. You don't need perfect knowledge or exotic herbs or ceremonial garb. You only need to pay attention, to kneel in the garden, to watch what grows when no one is watching, to listen when the rosemary rustles, when the dandelion pushes through concrete, when mugwort greets you in your dreams. Because the garden is not just behind us in history, it is beneath us, around us, within us. And the plants always are willing to teach. All we must do is ask.